This week on the PRESSURECAST, inside sources name Nintendo's NX launch titles, Deus Ex imitates Black Lives Matter, and EA prepares a Pokemon Go of their own. It's Monday, August 8th, 2016. Everything happening in the world of video games is here, now, on the PRESSURECAST. Hey, Pressure Pals. Welcome to the 142nd episode of the PRESSURECAST. Video Games Are Dumb.com's weekly news panic that posts every single Monday on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, TuneIn Radio, Google Play Music, and America's longest-running independent newspaper at shepherdexpress.com. My name is Colin Tanner, and I am caffeinated and ready to ramble to you about some gosh darn video games. But in case you've never listened to the PRESSURECAST before, frankly, that kind of annoys me. Because, I asked you if you wanted to listen to the 124th episode, and you never texted me back. Way to go, jerk. But in case you've never listened before, each week the PRESSURECAST slices up the latest video game news, past, present, and future, and delivers it right into your ears through several sensational segments in 2 hours or less. If you want to contact the show and have your question, comment, or concern read on air, you can email pressurecast@gmail.com, you can tweet at PRESSURECASTPod, or you can even call or text your question 954-947-7377. And we didn't get any of those this week. I did get a voicemail telling me that I won a stay at a Ramada Inn, which is probably a scam to steal my credit card. So not a good week for the email and voicemail segments, but at least somebody contacted me with ill intent. But anyway, we need to get on the train. Chug 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 chug. Here comes the train. Tooty toot toot toot. Train is coming. Boop, boop. That's right, it's time for the Hype Train. Feel the PR vibrations as we barrel towards video game satisfaction station on the Hype Train. This is the part of the show we talk about all those upcoming video games to get you hyped up to spend all your money and become a video game guru. We are going to start it off with some very interesting news that was given to MCV, a very good UK website about video games and computers. Highly recommend you check them out. They received word from sources close to Nintendo that a number of launch titles will be coming alongside the Nintendo NX at some point in spring 2017, presumably March 2017. What they've said is that there will be a brand new Mario title. Obviously, Zelda's going to be there, and Game Freak will actually have Pokemon on the NX. I know what you're thinking already. You're going, big deal. Pokemon has been out on all these home consoles. 64, GameCube, Wii. No, not Game Freak's Pokemon. See, what would happen is Game Freak, they make the actual Pokemon games. The ones where you wander around, throw a Pokeball, catch, battle. There's a whole RPG element. All the other games, whether it was, all the Stadium titles or Stadium XD or whatever they called them, those are made by other developers. They were not core Pokemon experiences, but keep in mind that Nintendo NX is not just a home console, it's also going to be a portable if the rumors are to be believed. And if that's the case, well, think about it this way. Nintendo, for years and years and years, has tried to encourage Game Freak to release Pokemon on the console, and they say no. We are much happier on a mobile platform. We believe that's where Pokemon can thrive. And who can blame them? They're on a roll. Their game's so great. Why would they ever risk that? Well, by Nintendo doing this, they really are just kind of putting them in a corner. Like, well, the next home console's also a portable. So if you're making things for Nintendo portables, you're making things for a Nintendo home console. I would not be surprised if that was one of the deciding factors for Nintendo to make a hybrid console. If the rumors are to be believed. But they've also mentioned that Ubisoft, Activision, Warner Brothers, Square Enix, and Sega will also have titles shortly after launch. And I do want to pump the brakes on this just for a moment because I highly encourage you to go back to 2012. E3 2012, and watch the Nintendo press conference, the last real press conference they had before they went exclusively to Nintendo Directs. And what you'll see, I want to say about 20, 30 minutes in, is Reggie standing in front of a splash screen with all these developers. Like, oh my god, there's Namco Bandai, and whoa, there's Square Enix, there's Warner Brothers, blah, 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 blah. What did that really amount to? Lego games, re-releases of Batman titles, and, well, not much. But this is actually really exciting because if Nintendo is going to launch the NX with a Mario title, they're doing it right. They're doing it right. Now, if you listened last week, you know how skeptical I am of Nintendo's console or even handheld success in the near future. I'm a little skeptical. I'm not sure if going with another low-powered system is the right way to approach this generation. However, Mario is the perfect launch title. Perfect launch title. How perfect? Well, it came out shortly after the NES. It was not an NES launch title, as many people say. The Super Nintendo, the 64, and then we get to the GameCube with Luigi's Mansion. And I really believe the GameCube would have been a bigger success had they actually had a Mario title available at the launch of that system. Now, I know what you're saying. Wii Sports. That did very well. That's the reason the Wii sold in the first place. We'll get to that in just a moment. Then we go to Nintendo Land with the Wii U, and the system doesn't do very well. And not many people like Nintendo Land. I know there are defenders of Nintendo Land. Steve Cuff, who's on the show all the time, loves Nintendo Land, adores Nintendo Land. But I don't know about you, but I thought it was interesting, but not really something that I want to hunker down with. The reason that this would be very smart is that they need something like Mario at the launch. And it's not because of exclusively of brand recognition, because obviously Zelda's going to be there. But I don't know about you, but whenever I get a brand new console, I think, man, I want like a big, meaty, 40-hour game, or even like a 25-hour long game. That's what I want. I want that on my new console and show me the best graphics and blah, 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 blah. That's what I think I want. And then when I get that new console, I spend all my time playing something that's really simple. I have people ask me all the time, hey, I'm going to get a PlayStation 4. What should I get? I'm thinking about getting, Fallout 4. I'm The Witcher 3. What should I get? And I say, get Rocket League. What? Rocket League? I don't want that. I want something big. But no, you don't. You just want to have fun. You just want pretty visuals. That's all you really care about. That's why Mario's always been a success. People know how to play Mario, and it's very simple. Pick up and play. Run and jump. It's not about being in the dungeon and trying to solve a puzzle. That's fun. It really is. But that's when you're kind of warmed up to the console a bit. Now, when we talk about Wii Sports, that's something that just you instantly understand. It's a sports game. You know how to play sports, and, I'm going to swing the tennis racket. It all makes sense. So for them to launch a Nintendo console with Mario, that is a brand that people recognize, but most importantly, it's a game they understand. Run, jump, run and jump, basically. That's all it is. Hopefully it's 3D, because if it's a new Super Mario Brothers like they did with Wii U, that's not going to sell it. That's not, people like 3D Mario. Don't they? Don't they? I think they do. Honestly, I could see them launching Zelda and Pokemon and Mario all at the same time, at the launch date of the NX. And I know some people say, it'll cannibalize the sales of the other. No, it won't. Because if you went to a Walmart in the past 4 years, you can still find copies of Super Mario Galaxy that are $20 and beyond. And for years, it was $50. That's it. The price doesn't drop on Nintendo games because there's always especially if they're franchise games, I should say, because there's already a built-in audience for that. And if they're buying a Nintendo system, they probably want to play those titles. So just put them out all at once. And the hardcore Nintendo fans, they're going to buy them all at once. That's how this works. Anyway, let's move on. Toot toot. Big time news for PlayStation 4 owners. Playdead's Inside is going to be released on that system on August 23rd. Now, previously, this was only announced for the Xbox One and PC, and this is what's so crazy about this story. 2 months ago, we didn't even know this game had a release date. Now, 2 months later, not only is it out, but we have another version of the game being released on an unannounced console. That's bonkers. And in case you don't know, Playdead is the team behind Limbo, a game I never really cared for. I want to stress that. Never really cared for it. And then I played Inside, and it blew my mind. It is one of the best games of 2016 so far. I can't imagine it's not going to be in the top 10 by the end of the year. So when it does come out on August 23rd, if you do have a PlayStation 4, definitely spend that money, spend the 3 hours, play that game. You're instantly going to want to talk about it with other people and think about it. And lucky for you, of course, we did a special episode of the PRESSURECAST all about Inside. So check out the Inside Spoilercast at youtube.com/videogamesardumb. Convenient plug. But seriously, I cannot believe that it went from what was a perceived exclusive to another console in like a month? Month and a half? Blows my mind. Toot toot. The Xbox One S, of course, launched last week, and it does have a brand new GPU, or at least an overclocked GPU. Previously on the Xbox One, there was an 853 megahertz GPU. Now that's been up to 914. Of course, Digital Foundry, the awesome website and YouTube page that studies frame rates and technical specs on video games, they actually did a couple of tests, and they discovered that on some titles, the Xbox One S is able to perform 9 frames per second better than the original Xbox One, which is fairly good news, because that means that the Xbox One S is indeed, at least technically, even at a very small level, better. Now, I don't know about you, but when someone says, oh, this has 9 frames per second better, if it's a 30 frame per second game, it's like, oh, wow, 39 frames per second? No, I'm good. I don't need that. For me, it's 60 or it's 30. Anything in between for me is, I don't really notice it. But I do like the idea that they can actually, obviously Microsoft's not bragging about this because it doesn't work on all titles across the board. This is very select titles. And they didn't notice any sort of lower performance whatsoever. The Xbox One S performed equally or better on every single Xbox title. But I think this does encourage some buyers to hear, oh no, they fixed it. You know, even though it's not true. They don't even know why they don't want an Xbox One. But they just hear, oh, they made it better. They fixed it. They fixed that problem. And I wonder how many people out there that are purchasing the Xbox One S, we'll get into a story later because it is selling quite well. I wonder how many of them are getting confused between this and the Scorpio. Like they believe this is somehow the Scorpio. They're flipping over the box and seeing 4K Blu-ray player and going, oh, yep, this is the one that I want. I'd be curious to see that. Let's move on. Oh, by the way, real quick, I really want that new Xbox One S controller. The one that has Bluetooth. Looks awesome. Plus, I don't want to spend $150 on a Elite controller. Toot toot. Good news if you are a fan of the Yakuza series, or potentially good news. Producer, we're going to try this. Toshihiro Naguchi. Hey, I did pretty good that time. You know, I'm not the best with Japanese names. He was talking about Yakuza 0, and during an interview, he said that they potentially have interest in remaking, or I should say remastering, Yakuza 2, 3, 4, and a bunch of other different ones. Now, Kiwami is a remake of the very first one. Cool. It's on the PlayStation 4. It's on the PlayStation 3. Yakuza 0 is a prequel to the very first game. And that's actually going to be out in the West. When is the exact date? January 24th. Awesome. That's 2 days after my birthday. I'll be Yakuzaing it up. So, I actually really like this idea. Because if they release Yakuza 0 in the West, and it does okay, all right? So 0 is a prequel. Well, then hell. Let's release Kiwami. That's Yakuza 1, so it could be like the next follow-up. And if they are going to remake Yakuza 2, 3, 4, 5, and eventually release 6 in the West, that's perfect, because the thing about Yakuza is it is a soap opera. There are characters that go in and out of the series, some live, some die, and if someone dies in one game, there are repercussions for their death in the next game. You really need to be involved in the narrative, and thankfully the story is so good that you want to be involved in the narrative. Besides that, the gameplay is ridiculous. It's essentially a JRPG with beat-em-up gameplay. So you'll be walking down the street and some street punk will walk up to you and go, hey old man, give me all your money. And instead of giving him all your money, you pick up a stop sign and beat his head in. It's marvelous. You have to play Yakuza if you haven't before. I know they just released Yakuza 5 on PlayStation Plus for this month. I do not think that's a good starting point for anyone that wants to get into Yakuza. It's sort of a more dour look at the franchise because things have happened, people have aged. It's just not a good place to start. It's like your very first Batman book being The Dark Knight Returns, like old Batman. That doesn't work for me. You know, you want to go through this chronologically. So hopefully Sega will do that. I really hope so, because those games are great. Toot toot. Oh dear. Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 and 2 did indeed come out, and, you know, one or two problems here or there. You know, frame rate was kind of garbage. It actually kind of looks worse than the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC originals. Kind of a problem. But fear not, Activision is going to fix this. Here's what they said. Both the standalone and bundled version of Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2 feature all of its original DLC. We are still working on making the DLC for the first Marvel Ultimate Alliance available in the coming weeks as a free update for everyone who has purchased the title on these platforms alone or as part of the bundle. We're focusing on identifying, fixing the issues that have been occurring, and there are a lot of issues. Controller issues, primarily for the PC, frame rate issues, and also the DLC wasn't available for the very first Marvel Ultimate Alliance. This is kind of troubling news because I mentioned this before. I really believe that when Disney announced they're getting out, we're done with Disney Infinity, we're just gonna, you know, have other people take care of our games. And then, of course, we saw the announcement for the brand new Spider-Man game on PlayStation 4. So this is where they're going to be going. And we're going to go to our next story in just a second, talking about remasters and re-releases. This is probably a big initiative over at Disney Interactive, which is now going to be a publisher rather than a developer. And it's people are going to be second guessing every time they do one of these Marvel games. I'm not sure if they're going to connect the dots when they re-release Disney games, but when you announce, oh, we're finally going to release X-Men Legends because we finally got the rights back from Fox or whatever, people are going to, be a little bit reluctant, and they should be, because these Marvel Ultimate Alliance games were $40 alone or $60 together, which is kind of bonkers, for this day and age. I don't associate price and value and the worth of a game. But when you're, charging a standard price for a 10-year-old title and it's worse than its 10-year-old counterpart, you've got some real problems. So hopefully they can win back that goodwill by fixing this. And I don't know, throw them a free game. See if they can get the rights to that. And I know they won't do X-Men stuff, but that Wolverine Origins game, which is amazing. You literally stab someone through the head or through the chest with your Wolverine claws and lift up their body into a helicopter and cut their head off. That's a cool game. I had a cool time with that. Toot toot. So, we were just talking about some re-releases. Well, Disney has re-released 3 of their classic 16-bit movie licensed games, including The Lion King, The Jungle Book, and Aladdin from the Genesis on Good Old Games. They are $10 individually or $9 currently because they're doing some sort of promotion, or $20 altogether. It's really cool that they actually picked the right Aladdin. Because, of course, the one on the SNES is garbage, and anyone that likes it is stupid. But the one on the Genesis is the best game of all time. Better than anything ever. Ever. I'm just kidding, but it's a real contentious point. Aladdin on the SNES versus the Genesis. And I forget the name of the guy. He was also involved in Resident Evil, who worked on Aladdin on the SNES. Even he kowtowed to the fans, saying, nope, the Genesis version is a lot better. This is just a very smart choice for Disney, just saying, hey, we have so many of these back titles that people like. If you go on YouTube and just type in The Lion King on SNES or Genesis or whatever, I believe actually it was the Genesis version is far superior. Except for that one level where the monkeys have to throw you around, which is insane. Had something to do with rentals. But if you look that up, you're just going to see dozens of videos of random people on YouTube doing a retro review on that and getting a decent amount of views. Well, now they want to play that game. What are they going to do? They're going to download an emulator. Why not just, cut that right out and say, hey, you know what? $20, we'll give it all these games, and they're going to be, I don't know, console perfect, which is a lie, but just let them lie or whatever. So very smart on Disney's part. Toot toot. XCOM 2 is indeed coming to the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One soon. Just later than we expected. Originally, it was supposed to release on September 6th. It has now been pushed back to September 27th. Take-Two president Carl Sladoff had this to say. They want to make sure they ensure the game is fully polished at launch and meets the team's high standards. Well, it's funny because I remember when they launched XCOM 2 on the PC, there were a lot of issues. It was overly demanding on hardware, no matter how good it looked, which was good, but not as good as it was demanding. So they had to put out a bunch of patches that eventually kind of reeled the game back into, sane standards of hardware. The thing that I'm wondering, though, is 3 weeks isn't any sort of time to really work on a game. I guess you can push back manufacturing and the printing of discs? Well, no, not really either. I assume what's going on here is that they're actually working on a patch. They want to make sure the day one patch is good. I'm sure, and this is just me assuming, they probably have some performance issues, much like they did on the PC. But from all accounts, the game is fantastic. I'm really looking forward to it. And we all knew this was going to happen. We all knew this was going to happen, Captain, because I was just thinking about Captain Crunch again. I'm sorry. You ever had peanut butter crunch? The best. Let me tell you. Don't get me wrong. Berries are okay. Regular. Not bad. It doesn't really shred my mouth like everyone else's. I don't know what's up with that, but I just torture my mouth all day with like hot sauce and burning coffee, so maybe that's it. But back on subject. The original XCOM on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 played beautifully. It was a reasonable way to play on a controller, an actual reasonable way to play. Of course, I thought it was better on PC. As I predict, XCOM 2 will be better on PC in the long run. But these are fantastic strategy games. If you're a fan of Fire Emblem, you're really going to want to check these out. Toot toot. We have another Xbox One backwards compatible game, but this one is a little more interesting. Somebody asked Phil Spencer on Twitter, is Blue Dragon coming to backwards compatibility? Which, of course, was a very interesting JRPG that was released on the Xbox 360. Phil responded, I'm not allowed to say. But yes. You gotta love this guy. How coy is that? Oh, I can't tell you. But yeah, absolutely. 100%. 110%. Of course, the big difference with this game is that it is on 3 discs, which I'm really curious to see how that's going to work. Do you just pop in one of the discs? Is there all the discs, or is it just the first disc before you can download? Because in case you don't know, Xbox One backwards compatibility does not play off of the disc. You have to have the disc inside the system unless you download it from the store. But you put the disc in, it says, hey, we have an update, and that update is literally the entire game. It's just downloading it right to your console. So whether it was, Red Dead Redemption, Deus Ex, or whatever it was that you pop into your Xbox, it just downloads the game, which is why it has reduced load times and things like that. Hopefully this means we'll start to get some of those more multi-disc games on the Xbox 360, because there were certainly a lot of later titles on the 360 that were great, that had multiple discs. Maybe we'll get Rage on the Xbox backwards compatibility, or my personal favorite, L.A. Noire. Girl, I loves me some L.A. Noire. Seriously, fantastic. Team Bondi, doesn't sound like you have the best business practices because you don't exist anymore, but you made a really good 1940s detective game. Post-war detective game, too. God, that game was good. God, just thinking about it, whenever I think of that game, there's just like a made-up trailer playing in my head. I just start thinking of the best parts of it, and it's overwhelming. Toot toot. Battlefront 3. It doesn't exist. There was a Battlefront 1, there was a Battlefront 2, and now there's just Star Wars Battlefront on the current gen. But there was a time, oh yes, there was a time when Pandemic was working on Battlefront 3, and of course we saw that YouTube video of leaked footage that involved someone getting into a ship that was on a planet and flying all the way up into outer space. And it took them a while to do it, but they finally reached it, and there was a giant battle, and lasers were flying everywhere. What a dream, Of course, the dream was canceled. We don't know why. I mean, we have the reasons they've stated, but we'll never know for sure. Thankfully, Frontwire Studios decided, hey, we'll make Battlefront 3, and so they started working on this fan project, and they were ready to actually put it online. I believe they were going to charge for it at some point. It was called Star Wars Battlefront 3 Galaxy in Turmoil, okay? Well, Disney I don't know if you know this, they're kind of a big company, so they just were like, no, you can't, no, thank you. Please stop doing that. So, Tony Romanilli, it's not an easy name to say, had this to say. He is from Frontwire Studios, the people working on this fan-created game. On Wednesday, June 22nd, 2016, we received a letter from Lucasfilm requesting that we halt production of Galaxy in Turmoil with any Star Wars-related IP at once. Rather than laying down at the sign of first trouble, I requested a meeting with Lucasfilm execs to discuss our project. He actually got that meeting. Blah, 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 blah. EA's main concern was due to the possibility of Galaxy in Turmoil taking away attention from their Battlefront franchise. I tried to pitch the idea about putting Galaxy in Turmoil behind EA's paywall, but was told that EA had previously rejected that proposal as well. With that being said, we will still create the game. You will have all wanted and deserved, even if it turns out not to be Star Wars related. So they're taking away the Star Wars name, and I assume they're going to have to change some of the art on there. So it can't be an X-Wing, now it's going to be a Wing X. I don't know. I tried to come up with a different letter, but I think they're all taken in the Star Wars universe by this point. Got to sell those toys after all. Now, I know that they're saying, hey, we're just going to, presumably they're just going to swap out the art. But that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work, especially if we don't know how the art's going to look. I mean, someone might design a spaceship and everyone hates it, and then there's all sorts of issues there, and then they go, oh, damn you, Disney. But, designing all new planets, all new ships, all new guns, all new sound effects, that's a lot of work for a small team, and they are a small team. So we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. But for the time being, I wouldn't expect seeing this on Steam anytime soon. Toot toot. Really good news for Vita owners. Darkest Dungeon, the roguelike dungeon crawler turn-based thing, is going to be out on the PlayStation 4 and the Vita on September 27th. It will cost $25. But most importantly, cross-buy, cross-save. You buy one, you get the other. There's just not much else there. I understand that, Vita's not lighting the world on fire, but it's just nice to see any sort of support for the console. Toot, toot. Oh boy. So, I'm sure that you saw the title of the episode, so you know we're going to next. We are going to be talking about Deus Ex: Mankind Divided. Earlier this week, a new bit of promotional art was released for Deus Ex: Mankind Divided, and it included an image of some protesters. They were holding a bit of cloth, like a big banner, and you can see that was spray painted on there. OG's lives. Oh no, OG. I already screwed up. OG lives matter. That's what it said. OG lives matter. And right away, there were some people that were kind of like, what the hell are you doing? Now, it's important to point out, this is promotional art. That does not mean it will be in the game. In fact, I would wager it won't be in the game. But this game is addressing issues like apartheid. Touchy subjects. Very touchy subjects. We have the Deus Ex Global Executive Brand Director, Andre Vu, had this to say to some of the criticism that he received. No, you are just trying probe. Okay, he literally wrote no, the letter U, the letter R, just trying to probe. These words were thought in our game before the current events. Unfortunate coincidence for us. I'm going to call bullshit right there. Manveer Air. I'm sorry. Look, all these people have dumb names. They got dumb names. The fact that you went forward with posting the image and not realizing the optics / meaning of that image to people is incompetent. Manveer Air, of course, he's a BioWare designer, so he's in the game industry. He's not just throwing random stones. He works on titles, and BioWare titles, which we'll talk about in just a moment. They actually, I believe it was Polygon was talking to Mr. Air, and he said, I accept Mr. Vu's assertion that it was coincidental. I don't know why you would. but fine. But that doesn't negate my criticism. It is bad optics. Optics meaning, you're looking at something. It's a bad look. And marketing departments of all departments should understand optics and how to react to the current state of the actual world. So just for a really just dumbed down version of this, it's just a bad look. When people look at your product, they see this. And you want to have a certain image. And he's saying that that's a bad image. He also goes on, my qualm is not with the game tackling matters of segregation, civil rights issues, and apartheid. In fact, I applaud games that try to tackle difficult political issues. My problem is using marketing to push a narrative which does not provide the full context of the game as a way to sell the game when the narrative comes across as anti-blackness, even if it's not intended to be. Oh boy. We're talking politics. Hope you're excited. So here's the thing. He says it's coming off as anti-blackness. I don't really see that, because it just says All Lives Matter. Maybe he's talking about the negative perception of Black Lives Matter. We do need to touch on what Black Lives Matter is just for a moment here. I'm going to give you the most skimmed down version possible. If you actually want to understand more about this sociological issue, there are tons of more qualified, much smarter, more articulate people out there. You can go out and find them. And please don't trust your drunk uncle to describe the current political climate. He's not really the best source. So, Black Lives Matter is a movement that is a response towards a number of black men that have been killed by police officers. And ever since this started, which was a series of protests and also a presence on social media, there have been some responses, starting with an All Lives Matter thing. I don't even think All Lives Matter is not actually a group. It's just some, hashtag people use. And then Blue Lives Matter, which isn't really a group either. And Black Lives Matter does actually have people that are key to their involvement. Now, before we go on any further, it's really important to point out that as it is a large-scale movement, which really anyone can join, of course you're going to have people that are awesome, and they are exactly the right person to talk to the public about these very sensitive issues. And of course, you're going to have other people that are really bad at talking to the public. So let's not go there and say, hey, this person said this on Twitter, this person said that on Twitter. I don't care. All right, we're just focusing on the idea of a current political issue occurring in a video game. And, not trying to undermine anyone's political beliefs. Okay? Great. Relax. There's someone out there that's still mad. Chill. Please. I'm not trying to be a spokesperson for anyone. However, I do like video games. And I do like art in general. And video games are art. And art is a representation of human psychology, of the human experience. Thoughts, dreams, beliefs, whatever it might be. And politics is one element of the human experience. And it's no stranger to art. I understand that people are really worried. They see a movement being co-opted by a video game or appropriated into a video game, and they feel either that it shouldn't be there because they don't like that movement, or it shouldn't be there because they are part of that movement and they think that it's undermining the meaning. And the thing is that it cannot possibly represent your feelings or the entire issue, but that's never really been the purpose of political art. And while people still think of video games as kid things, plenty of people do, even if they play it on their phone, they're like, it's some dumb kid game, whatever that might be. I really believe that video games do need to tackle politics more frequently. We are in an age where the average player is over 30 years old. And that should mean something. We can handle complex issues. And I would like to make the comparison, which I always find to be a pretty apt comparison, of video games and comic books. And I want to take you back to the 1960s to a character known as Trash Man. And you might not remember Trash Man. I learned about Trash Man from a documentary called Comic Book Confidential way back when. And here's what Trash Man's all about. He is a dude with a gun who shoots aristocrats and corrupt officials. He is preparing he's preparing basically the downfall of I don't know how to phrase this. He's an anarchist, basically. He does not agree with the current situation, which you can imagine in the late 60s makes a lot of sense. So we've got a guy running around shooting aristocrats and corrupt officials. That's pretty blunt. You know, it's not very subtle with its approach, which I actually imagine that's how Deus Ex is going to be. It's going to be something that's kind of in your face, kind of ridiculous. But let's keep going with this, okay? Because after Trash Man, a few years later, we see Green Lantern and Green Arrow. They teamed up, right? What happened there? Well, there was a very important issue where a black man is talking to Green Lantern and says, you know, you've taken care of the blue man, the purple man, you've gone all around the galaxy. This is your home. You live on Earth. What have you done about the injustice to the black man? That was startling. That was amazing. People going, oh my God, I can't believe they're talking about this. Okay, so we're talking civil rights and fairly liberal perspectives here. But because that existed, you could get a response a few years later. Frank Miller, The Dark Knight Returns. I would say that that is a highly conservative approach. Now, I'm not saying that conservatives are going to run out and pull a punk with sharpened teeth out of a tank and beat him up. Actually, no, wait, the guy pulled him out of the tank. What I'm trying to say is that there was a response, and then we can get into more complex issues like, Mouse, or which of course is more of a historical reference. But because these things existed, you can have something like The Dark Knight, the movie, which is all about George W. Bush and the surveillance state, and why it might be necessary when dealing with the war on terror. So a very conservative perspective. Now, you might not even have noticed that, but you definitely thought there is something more to this game. There's a deeper logic in this game, or in this movie, than just a simple action film. You knew that deep down. And that's something we need to start to embrace when it comes to video games. We need to be able to accept political messages about current events. Now, we've seen plenty of games that will talk about philosophy. You know, what is reality, man? Woo. And then we see things like BioShock, which we're dealing with things like Ayn Rand, or Ayn Rand, I should say. We need to be willing to accept that. And because video games, more so than books, and I really believe this. When we are talking about entertainment, more so than books, more so than films, more so than anything I can think of, forces you to empathize. It puts you in someone else's shoes. You know, quite literally, you are them, and you must experience the world as they do. Now, whatever your political leaning is, that could be very beneficial to getting your point across. Now, regardless of whether or not there is virtue in that message, whether or not that there is a artistic merit to that message, or even a quality product or quality experience in that game, that doesn't really matter. It matters that we start. Because for so long, it's just like, oh, geez, oh, we don't want to, that's trouble. Oh, I don't know if I want to play that because it's X, Y, or Z. Look at what goes on Twitter or on social media. Video games are already politicized. We're already there, and we need to embrace that. And whereas in the previous age, the 60s and the 70s, if you could simply get enough money together, you could print out your comic books, or you could make a very controversial film. That made you sort of mainstream. No matter how independent you were, that made you sort of mainstream. But now with the internet, everyone can do everything. So I really believe it is important for AAA studios to take a chance and make that next Deus Ex, or that next Spec Ops The Line. Because even if it fails, and it is stupid and ridiculous and almost insulting, that will give the opportunity for someone else to respond. And when they do, we might have the next great work. It's incredibly important. Why are video game stories bad? Because they were based around very simple old myths. Run over there, kill the thing, save the thing, collect the thing. We need to enter an age of more complex issues, where we no longer think of video games as simple fun, but also take them as engaging. Now, is Mario going to start talking to us about gun control and tariffs? I hope not, because it'll always be just one element of everything else. You can have your American Sniper, and you can have, I don't know, Weekend at Bernie's. Whatever. I hope this turned out well. Anyway, if you have any feelings on this, about introducing political messages into video games, in the description below, you can contact. We'll respond on air. All right. Toot, toot. Here are the games that are going to be out this week. On Tuesday, No Man's Sky is out on the PlayStation 4. Heart and Slash is out on the PC. Indigo Prophecy is out on the PlayStation 4. That is a re-release of a video game from 2005, I want to say. It's a PlayStation 2 game, though I'm not sure if it's going to be a PS2 classic or if they're going to be enhancing it. It's the same team behind Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls and the upcoming Detroit. And also One Night in Karazhan, a Hearthstone adventure, will be out on PCs, phones, and tablets. Boop, boop. That's right. The hype train is over. We'll see how that turned out. Probably a bad time to do this, but as always, do go to iTunes and give the PRESSURECAST 5 stars and a written review. It really helps us out. We'll see. Anyway, it's getting a little heated in here. We've had some serious conversations, so let's go outside. Get out the lunch boxes. We're going to go to a place that's always warm with the glow of cold, hard cash. That's right. It's time for... the Chart Park, the land where money grows on trees. Yes, the Chart Park. This is the part of the show where we talk about all the business, legal, and financial news in the video game industry, and we find out which fat cats of Wall Street will tip their top hats towards Lady Luck. We're going to start off with some UK news. Unlike America, where we don't exactly get weekly numbers here and there, over in the UK, they're a lot more open, and 3DS sales have been up over 200%. 3DS XL hardware is at 222%, and 2DS is up 234% from the previous week. Why? Because Pokemon Go, Pokemon Go is actually one of the best-selling games of that week as well. Which says to me, Nintendo, I hope you're paying attention, because you understand that instead of trying to create these unique experiences like a Miitomo, you will go after things like Animal Crossing, which they do have in the works, to encourage sales of games that are already out there. Kind of like what they outlined way back in 2014, I want to say, when Iwata basically said this, we'll be using this almost as a promotional tool to encourage people to pick up our consoles. Well, it's clearly working already, even if Nintendo didn't have the most direct involvement with Pokemon Go. And obviously, you're not going to see this success replicated, like, oh, Animal Crossing's the next Pokemon Go. Not going to happen, but I do think this is a great source to get people to pick up a 3DS or an NX in the near future. Moving on, Xbox One, also over in the UK, you can buy one of those for £349 if you can find one. Apparently, they're already sold out on Amazon and local shops all across the UK, and there are even auctions that are going as high as £565. That is insane. That's like 33% of the actual price. More than that, actually. This means there is a serious demand for that console, at least in the UK, which is a very important market. And basically everything I said before, where people are looking at it, it's a white console, it's very sleek looking, it's smaller, the power brick is inside. I really think people are willing to give the Xbox brand another shot. Whereas the Xbox One, it launched under a bunch of controversy and misinformation generally after it launched. There were issues before it released when people were talking about DRM, but clearly that's not what they did. But regardless, that kind of stuck with them. So it is kind of cool to see that, for a good console, which the Xbox One is definitely a good console. I love my PlayStation 4. That's where I play almost everything. But I also really love my Xbox One, especially with those great exclusives. You got Forza out there, and also the Master Chief Collection is quite good. And also Rare Replay. A lot of those were just games that already came out. But hey, that just worked with me. Good news if you're a Call of Duty fan. Well, I guess this isn't really good news to you, but it's news, all right? Just work with me. According to Activision, Black Ops 3 continues to be the top-selling current-gen game, which means it's beat out everything. Name a current-gen game. Nope. Call of Duty just beat it. Sorry, it's at the very top. And I understand some people really don't like Call of Duty. I understand that there are also people out there that are insane and accuse Call of Duty of doing everything wrong with video games. But you know what? What this is Call of Duty does have some sort of claim for the success of the Xbox One, the PlayStation 4, because people are picking up consoles, and if this is the game that most people are picking up, that says something. And if you don't like Call of Duty, if you're really that mad about it, really consider this. Whatever brings people into the ecosystem encourages their chances of picking up titles you probably like, I don't know, The Witcher 3 or Fallout or Rocket League. Call of Duty does that. It brings people in. It's not a bad thing. Overwatch, there's some really good news here. 15 million players globally. That was announced by Blizzard Activision, or Activision Blizzard. They didn't actually give out sales numbers, no specific sales numbers, which is, not great. Obviously, if you have one disc copy on any system and you have multiple accounts, that would account for a unique player. They don't actually release this information. Of course, we can see the NPDs even without the numbers, so we know where it kind of stacks. And you can go to places like VG charts and see how many physical copies have sold. But you have to imagine that most of those titles sold on the PC through the BlizzNet program. So kind of, it's kind of a black box. We just have to kind of go with them. Like, okay, 15 million globally, which is very good because it only came out a couple of months ago. We have more information, though, about Activision's financial quarter, which ended on June 30th. We're going to be going through a lot of these financial quarters, so just keep in mind they ended on June 30th, 2016. They are the first quarter of the 2017 financial year. Activision had GAAP net revenue of $1.57 billion. That is a 50% increase over the same period. So whenever I say increase, we're talking about the same period last year. So what we're talking about is at the end of June 30th, 2015, they were 50% less than where they are now. You following me? Because we're going to be going through a lot of these. Most of it came from digital business, which actually brought in $1.14 billion, which is incredible just from digital. But of course, this is Blizzard. Not to mention that they also have King Games, the people that make things like Candy Crush, which also accounts for why they have 491 million active monthly users. They have, they have King Games. There's a reason they bought them, because they could actually brag about numbers like that. Blizzard actually accounts for 33 million of those users, however. I gotta say, Activision, they're just killing it. And it's not just Call of Duty or some of their smaller titles. Obviously, Tony Hawk 5 brought in the bulk of that cash. I'm kidding. But the idea that they have all these different fronts that they're going towards. King can take on mobile, all right? Blizzard can really attack PC platforms with World of Warcraft and Overwatch, and of course Call of Duty. But Activision, the side of things, can really focus on consoles and making sure that they have Call of Duty out there, which they all do very well. They have fantastic properties that have a recognizable brand and are on different platforms. There's a reason Activision does very well. We're going to continue that theme now later on in the show. Let's talk about Ark Survival Evolved, which has hit 5.5 million players. Of course, 4 million of those are on PC, 1.5 million are on the Xbox One. We don't have PlayStation 4 numbers yet. the co-founder of Wildcard, the developer of Ark Survival Evolved, Jeremy Stigiz. These names, I'm telling you, I don't understand. If you're in the video game industry, you can't have like Bill Smith. They don't work there. Those people work at a post office. If you're in video games, you have to have some crazy hard to pronounce name. Here's what he had to say. The launch was an unexpected success, but that's also a double-edged sword because when it succeeds at that level, it raises expectations about how ambitious the game is going to be and how large of a scope it is going to have when it's finished. He then announced that the free version, Survival of the Fittest, is now going away and will just be included with the actual, as a package deal when you buy Ark Survival Evolved. When we came to the decision that Survival of the Fittest will be brought back internally as part of the Ark Survival Evolved package, for technical functionality, it will still exist as its own application, and everyone who has thus far played the game will continue to be able to play it without having to own Ark Survival Evolved. But going forward, it will be considered part of Ark Survival Evolved product group. Man, he just says the name of the game a lot there. It makes sense. Survival of the Fittest was to gain interest. They already have the interest. There's no reason to have a free-to-play version. If this was a AAA studio, I might disagree, but Wildcard it's rather small. They're growing, but they're still fairly small. Why not just get all the money that you can? And besides that, they're not screwing over the people that already download the free-to-play version. They can still play that indefinitely. But, you know, there's no reason to have that continue to exist anywhere. Moving on, bad news for Fireforge. They were the developers behind that Ghostbusters game. If you want to know how that game was, you can go to youtube.com/videogamesardumb and check out my episode of Worth It on it. I'll just let you know up front, it was awful. It was awful. It was a very bad sort of isometric dungeon crawler type game where you just shot the same ghosts over and over and over and over again. Well, Fireforge announced that they had filed for bankruptcy 3 days after releasing the Ghostbusters game, which they were already not doing very well. They already had $12 million in debt, and they were working with Razer and Tencent on a series of MOBA projects that never really solidified. You know, I feel bad for them because this is kind of on Activision. They gave them this project and only allowed them to work on it for 9 months. 9 months in 2016. Hey, make a licensed game. Good luck. And so it makes a lot more sense while the game sucks. But still, no, there's no excuse for it. You can feel bad for a developer and still criticize their product, which is exactly what I'm doing. That game is garbage. Do not play that game. Moving on, Relentless is also shutting down. They're out of the UK, and they made the Buzz series. They were founded way back in 2003, and now they are no more. It is important to point out that, you know, Buzz was a pretty big success. It was the game on the PS2, and I think there was even one on the PlayStation 3. It was the game show game that came with unique controllers where you had to hit the button, and then there were 4 other buttons where you could answer questions. It was fun for what it was. It was a cheap little gimmick, something that I think you can probably do a lot better with on phones nowadays, like what they do with something like the Jackbox, instead of having to have proprietary hardware and all that. That had to be very expensive. But they entered into self-publishing in 2009, and that's when the decline started. So when we do talk about companies like Techland entering publishing or other companies, it really is a huge risk. It's not like you're going to fold overnight, but sooner or later, costs start to accumulate. You start sinking into debt, and you have to dissolve the entire company. So maybe not a brand that you really remember, but they were pretty big at one time. Let's talk about EA, and let's talk about Battlefield. We also have EA's financial numbers for the quarter. Blake Jorgensen, the chief financial officer of EA, had this to say about Battlefield 1. Typically, a Battlefield does $15 million in a year. Our guidance is slightly under that, and we hope that excitement builds and it'll go through that number. But for now, it's slightly under that number. So we're not going to say 15 million. Yeah, probably a little bit lower. Probably a little bit lower. Okay. He also said Titanfall did a little more than 7 million units last time. It was early in the cycle, one of the few titles out there. We think Titanfall 2 will do more than that, but it's probably closer to 10 million than it is to 15 million as built into our guidance. So, 9 to 10 on Titanfall and just under 15 on Battlefield 1. This is why EA does so well. They're just like, we did that last time, but, we're not sure where the market is. We're just going to say a little bit lower. Despite the fact that the market is growing, despite the fact that more consoles are sold, they keep saying, our next title that has all this hype, our guidance on this, which is guidance saying here's the expectation on the sales of the game. We're gonna edge that a little bit lower. They constantly say, we think it's gonna do okay, so they don't scare off investors. They don't want to scare them off, saying, it's gonna do a little bit less than the last one, which was a runaway success. And then what happens is it's probably going to oversell. It's going to sell beyond that expectation. How do you know this? Because they do it almost every single year. The previous Battlefield, like Battlefield 4, it's maybe like 10 million, maybe slightly under that because that's what Battlefield 3. Oh, well, 15 million. Who saw that coming? Wow, what a surprise. And so it basically shows them to be doing better than expected. And it's very important. It's that balancing act of just saying, not over-promising, but still over-delivering. And they do that every financial quarter. If you need any proof, let's look at what they had for their first financial quarter of the 2017 financial year. GAAP net revenue was $1.271 billion. They estimated $125 billion. Oh, what do you know? We went over. Who thought that? The operating income was $560 million. They had advised that it would be at $512 million. Oh, what do you know? Oh, that's weird. We got to get better at this guidance thing, huh, guys? Like, come on. We know. Battlefield altogether had 11.5 million unique players, not 11.5 people, 11.5 million. Battlefront had 6.6 million unique players. They also point out that 54% of their net revenue was from digital. And also downloads were up at $137 million. Extra content was up to $300 million. Mobile was up to $165 million. And subscriptions such as EA Access, including ads, were up to $87 million. I would like to highlight real quick that they mentioned mobile was up 16% at $165 million. I'd really pay attention to that. Because I think they're trying to embrace that market. They have been in the past few years, but they were talking about making that Minions game. I don't know if it came out or not. That's how mobile games are. They just randomly appear. But EA is actually doing quite well on mobile, which is surprising to me. They're nowhere near where Activision is with King Games, but they are edging closer in there. And I do see a number of EA titles doing pretty okay for them, but that is a market they really need to kind of lean a little more into. Let's talk about Square Enix's financial year. We are going to be talking about yen instead of dollars, so just move the decimal point to the left. So if we're talking about 4 billion, move that to the left and you'll have 400 million. Okay? Makes sense? Work with me here. Okay. Their revenue was up to 51.2 billion yen. So that's $500 million. You working with me here? 2 spaces with a decimal point. Okay. Operating income was up to 8.95 billion yen. They did point out that digital entertainment revenue of that was 37.5 billion yen. Operating income was 9.5 billion yen. Square Enix is doing very well for themselves, and I do want to take this time to kind of point out what they're doing well compared to some of these other companies. So let's talk about home consoles in the West. We've got our Hitman. We've got our Tomb Raider. Those are recognizable brands from Eidos. They invested in them, they acquired them, and they are reaping the benefits. Now let's go over to the East, where we can see these Dragon Quest games like Dragon Quest Builders, Dragon Quest Heroes 2, things that will sell moderately well over here and in the UK, but will do gangbusters over in Japan. They are diversifying that portfolio. But wait, we've got one more area we need to talk about, and that would be mobile, where they have done very well for themselves. I mean, They charge so much for some of their re-releases. You want to replay Final Fantasy V? That'll be $20 on your iPhone, and it looks like crap, but people still buy it. But they still go beyond that. Instead of just rehashing old properties, they take things like Hitman and Lorecroft and put them into their Go franchise. Excellent puzzle games that also bring in a lot of money for them, and they even re-release them on consoles, bringing in more dough. Square Enix is really smart here, and hopefully Final Fantasy 15 does well for them, because the Final Fantasy series on consoles has been it's been okay, but it's kind of lost its way as a juggernaut in the industry. So they're trying to bring that back, and it's one of the reasons they're trying to appeal to the Western market, because Final Fantasy is actually not as big in Japan as it was in the West. They're more into the Dragon Quest series. So anyway, but yes, diversifying the portfolio, good job. Let's go over to 2K Games. They actually had to address Battleborn. The Take-Two CEO, Strauss Zelnick. What did I say about those crazy names over in the game industry? He said for Battleborn, while the game launched to solid reviews, its performance in the market has been below our expectations. We think there remains an opportunity to grow the audience for this unique experience over time. Is there really an opportunity to grow the market for that? Probably not. I mean, maybe if it's free to play, I'm not really sure. So is he lying? No, there's just nothing he can really say. What is he going to do? Saying, oh yeah, that was a big mistake. We were stupid there. Well, yeah, let your investors lose confidence in you. Or is he going to say, oh, the game was really bad, and then once again lose confidence? The market's going to do whatever it wants with Battleborn. It's not really going to sell. So the least he can do is come out there and just say, oh, we thought we'd do better. We really did. Because he just has to acknowledge it. Doesn't really have to give a strong opinion on it. Just acknowledge what happened. And he did. Let's go to 2K's financial quarter, though. GAAP net revenue was up to $311.6 million. They pointed out that NBA 2K16 and GTA Online and Grand Theft Auto 5 are doing very well for them. Digital net revenue was up to $172.1 million. Of course, this has a lot to do with virtual currency and DLC, which is risen 18% year over year. A lot of that has to do with the NBA games and most importantly, GTA Online. They're just raking in the dough there. 31% of the overall revenue was from digital sales. So very good. Take-Two, however, still a net loss of $38.6 million. That looks to be a sort of, I don't know, a Battleborn-sized hole in their financial quarter, if I had to guess. Also pointing out that Rockstar Games is hard at work at something on exciting future... Okay, let's try this again. Rockstar Games also is hard at work on some exciting future projects that will be revealed soon. Well, that's pretty good. So let's look at this real quick. They're not in the same area as EA or Activision or Square Enix. They're not as big of a company to begin with, so that shouldn't be a huge deal. But what's going on here? They've got the NBA series, does juggernaut sales, does very well for them. They've got Grand Theft Auto. What do they need? What's going on here? What happened and what went wrong? I would have to guess that they really need to focus more on mobile. And I know you're rolling your eyes and going, I don't want to play mobile games. It's not for you, it's for somebody else. Don't worry. What they've done is they've re-released Grand Theft Auto, Chinatown Wars, Grand Theft Auto 3, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas on mobile. So you want me to play the same game with crappy touch controls? That doesn't sound too exciting. Or worse yet, when they release some version of NBA 2K, a lesser version of a great game. And that's been their strategy. Lesser versions of really good games. They need to rethink how they're approaching mobile, build games from the ground up, and actually pay attention to the market instead of just saying, it's the same thing, but on your phone. That's not going to attract users. That's not what attracts users. No one wants to play Candy Crush on their Xbox One. They certainly want to play it on their phone. Anyway, moving on, let's talk about Namco, which had a rather nondescript report. I went through the PDF file here. Net sales were up 5.4%. Operating income was up 29.1%, a fairly good quarter for Namco Bandai. They also mentioned for home video game software in the network entertainment business in North America and Europe, sales were favorable for the new title Dark Souls 3, repeat titles, and titles owned by other companies sold utilizing the company's sales networks. When he means other, when he means titles owned by other companies, he is they are sort of talking about Dark Souls, which is self-published by From Software in Japan and only published by Namco Bandai outside of there. I have to imagine they're a little worried, because if Dark Souls 3 is what's really carrying this quarter, From Software has said they are taking a break from that series. Now, what does that mean for them? Does that mean that they're going to make something very similar and work with Namco? Maybe. Or they could be doing like what they did with Battleborn and just making an exclusive for PlayStation, which Sony Entertainment published Bloodborne, not Namco. They could be cutting out Namco altogether. Maybe they're unhappy with that relationship. And From Software has expanded. They finally opened up a brand new site, I want to say about half a year ago. So now they have two different areas of development right now. So if I was Namco, I'd be a little bit worried, because what else do they really have right now? Some anime games, which will do good. Some Tales games. Those RPGs are okay. They really need to somehow have something else besides Dark Souls, and soon, and something besides From Software, or at the very least propose some sort of agreement with From Software where they can make Dark Souls games of their own, hopefully. Let's talk about Sega. They actually had a pretty good quarter themselves. They had their sales were up to 692 million. Profits were up to 30 million, which is better than last year when they had a $93 million loss. You know, they're still not exactly where they need to be, but as they point out in their reports, they are doing very well in Europe and the United States with their PC initiative, with their strategy games that they are releasing, which, if you look, the more that they are invested in PC, the more their value rises, the more their profits rise. That would appear to be the direction for Sega. If I were them, I would say, hey, you're absolutely right. We are re-releasing those Yakuza games, and we're going to re-release them on PC. Why not? I guarantee you sold all 5 of those games, it would do very well. Though I wonder how difficult it would be to port Yakuza 3, 4, and 5, because they were built on cell architecture. Oh, whatever. I'm sure it'd be fine. Anyway, let's talk about the top best-selling games on PlayStation Network. Once again, I will point out, once Xbox starts making a list of their own, or Nintendo does, I will present that in the chart park. But they don't. I only have Sony numbers. Let's go to the top 3 of each platform. On PlayStation 4, number 3 was The Last of Us Remastered, number 2 was 7 Days to Die, and number 1 was God of War 3 Remastered. Sort of alarming, Uncharted 4 did not appear in the top 20, though a lot of these bigger titles were on sale, so maybe that's a reason. I Am Setsuna, the JRPG that was only released on the PlayStation 4 in America, that debuted at number 13. It is a digital-only title, so pretty well. Once again, Square Enix diversifying that portfolio. Love it. I can't believe how well they're doing for themselves. On PlayStation 3, number 3 was Minecraft PlayStation 3 Edition. Oh my god, people are still buying Minecraft. Number 2 was The Last of Us. And number 1 was Little Big Planet 3. That is a good game. I like Little Big Planet 3. I hope more of you will give it a shot. On Vita, number 3 was Adventures of Mana, which of course was a debut title in the month of July. I actually beat that game and was going to do a Worth It episode, but I didn't like the game at all and didn't even want to review it. I spent like, oh Jesus, how many hours did I spend? I spent a lot of hours. I actually saved all the video files just in case I ever want to do anything with it. Number 2 was God Eater Resurrection, and number 1 was Ratchet & Clank Collection. I'm really curious. I always heard that Ratchet & Clank Collection wasn't too hot. Or maybe it was the Jak and Daxter one, but I've always been reluctant to pick those up. Now let's go over to the UK to see what are the top 10 best-selling games over there. Number 10 is Ratchet & Clank. Number 9 is Minecraft Xbox Edition. Number 8 is Call of Duty Black Ops 3. Number 7 is Rocket League. Number 6 is Doom. Number 5 is Overwatch. Number 4 is FIFA 16. Number 3 is Grand Theft Auto 5. Number 2 is Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. And number 1 is Lego Star Wars The Force Awakens. And people say that British people sound smart. Maybe they sound smart, but they're buying the goddamn Lego game every week. I don't know. That's probably just some kids like, oh, I got a game. Let's go to the cursed land of trains known as Japan to see where the top 10 best-selling games over there. Number 10 is, oh boy, Sumiko Gurashi Mura Wu Tsukurona Desu on the 3DS. Number 9 is Minecraft Wii U Edition. Number 8 is Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. I believe those sales are an increase due to Pokemon Go. Just take your notes. Number 7 is Kirby Planet Robo. Number 6 is Yves 8 Lacrimosa of Dana. Number 5 is Toukiden 2 on the PlayStation 4. Number 4 is Toukiden 2 on the PlayStation Vita. I played the first Toukiden. It just seemed like a Monster Hunter knockoff. Number 3 was The Idol Masters Platinum Stars on the PlayStation 4, which is a new title. And number 2 was Puzzle and Dragon X Kami no Shu / Ryu no Sho, which is on 3DS. I guess that's a brand new Puzzle and Dragon game. I don't know if it actually has Mario involved in it at all, but it did very well. Number 2 for the week. And number 1 is Yokai Watch 3 Sushi Tempura on the 3DS. Doing very well for itself. I can't wait to play the next Yokai. I can't help it. Those games are cute. Now let's talk about the top selling consoles in Japan. Number 1, starting off, new 3DS LL with 24,118, PlayStation 4 with 20,567, PlayStation Vita with 11,016, Wii U with 5,228, new 3DS with 3,973, PlayStation 3 with 1,049, 3DS with 783, 3DS LL with 169, and in last place, the Xbox One with 68. And still no PlayStation Vita TV on the list. But that's going to do it for the Chart Park, the land where money grows on trees. That was a lot of numbers, huh? But hey, I hope they gave you a better perspective of how everyone's doing. I bet you thought Take-Two was doing a lot better. I bet you thought Square Enix was doing a lot worse. But you know, we're all learning something together. Let's step away from those hard numbers and let's talk about smaller things. That's right, it's time to get tiny. It's time for Pocket Talk, Pocket Talk, Pocket Talk. We are going to be starting it off with some Final Fantasy news. We were just talking about how Square Enix is doing great on mobile. Well, they have released Mobius Final Fantasy. Mobius. Why not? It's already out on iOS and Android, and the person that wrote the story is the same writer behind Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy VII. I actually took a look at it. I was expecting some sort of cutesy throwback pixel art thing, but no, this is full 3D. They actually have sort of a some sort of like a dual screen setup while you're navigating, and there's full combat and everything. It looks very pretty. I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but it is free to play, so go check it out if you wish. Over on the Pokemon Go front, according to the analyst firm Sensor Tower, Pokemon Go has already made $160 million in revenue. That's not bad considering the game came out, less than a month ago. Also worth pointing out that the average US user, their time spent with the game goes up every single day. About 26 minutes and 5 seconds is the current average, which is bonkers. Which means basically Pokemon Go is at this point outpacing other more popular apps. I'm sure it's not overcoming something like, Facebook or Twitter. But if you're Instagram or even Snapchat, you might want to be a little worried. So, Pokemon Go has also had a number of issues recently. Niantic has tweeted out, trainers, a new bug affecting throw accuracy increases the odds of escape and omits the XP bonus. We are working on a fix. Stay tuned. In case for some reason you've never played Pokemon Go, you actually have to throw the Pokeball. You have to fling it with your finger on the screen, and it hits the Pokemon that goes in, or it misses and it doesn't work, or it catches them for a second and they escape. Either way, you get an XP bonus if you catch them. Turns out, no, you don't right now, and it's really hard to catch them. I know a lot of people are mad at Niantic, but they are being crushed right now. If this was any other app, would we be talking about it? Maybe. because, hey, everything happened in the world of video games, past, present, and future. What can I say? But would everyone else be talking about it? Probably not. When you have this many eyes on you, even the smallest mistakes or just a slight tumble, for all I know, they could have already fixed this issue. It becomes headlines and opinion pieces and blogs and podcasts and everything all around the world. So I kind of feel for Niantic just a bit, even if it is quite annoying. And lastly, in Pocky Talk? Yeah, we're going to say it, Pocky Talk. CEO Andrew Wilson, he is the CEO of EA, had this to say. Pokemon Go is a great blend of an IP that we have known and loved for the best part of 20 years and a new technology that introduces that to a new audience through mobile devices. What you've heard from us is that we have been working on both VR and AR for some time. We've made some announcements around VR in mobile and on console with PlayStation VR, and we're going to continue to invest there. We have tremendously strong brands that are unbelievably social in nature, where we believe that participation at the community level through AR will heighten that experience. So I assume we'll be running around playing Battlefield, shooting each other in the streets. We've been working on some things for some time, and we'll continue to work on those, and we'll be ready to launch them at a time when we think we can better engage communities through AR. Like we were talking about before, EA and mobile, they're doing well. They're using a lot of licenses to kind of get attention on mobile, but they do need to start to use their own brands in unique ways like Pokemon Go. They're saying they're going to engage in augmented reality, which is what AR stands for, because in Pokemon Go, you literally see whatever your camera sees. They just put a Pokemon and an overlay on it. I don't know what property they would particularly go for. I imagine it's something like Plants vs. Zombies. That makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know exactly how that would work, but I don't think they'll be doing the exact same map system that Niantic has been using for Pokemon Go, location-based things. I can't imagine that because Niantic worked with Google. They were spun out by Google. They had access to Google Maps, which is why they had games like Ingress and Pokemon Go that that are registered everywhere. They've had years in the business. That's not exactly something you can jump on, but maybe every 50 steps or something in an EA game, a zombie pops out and you take your pea shooter and kill it. That's one avenue. It will be interesting to see where they go from here, though. Anyway, that's gonna have to do it for Pocket Talk, Pocket Talk, Pocket Talk. Let's take the mushroom. See, we got small for a second. We went back up. That's what the sound means. We've been talking a lot about EA this week, and we will continue that discussion right now in a less flattering manner, because it is time for the idiot of the week. That's right. This week's idiot is Electronic Arts, or maybe it's DICE, the creators behind the Battlefield series. They've announced a brand new collector's edition exclusive to Amazon. It is $130. In this pack, you will get, and I want you to just make sure you're sitting down because you might faint from all this excitement. For $130, you get a 14-inch statue, a cloth poster, a messenger pigeon that has DLC content inside of the tube. It's like a messenger pigeon tube, a deck of cards, and a steel bookcase for $130. So that's cool. Ordered from Amazon, fire up your console, and then go out and buy the game, because that $130 collector's edition has all these knickknacks but does not include the game. But to be fair, you can get all of that stuff and the game for $190, So that's pretty cool. Except it doesn't include that DLC. That's right, you get everything but the DLC. So let me get this right. So that's let's do the math right here. $190. So $130 gets you all that crap, and then you have to spend an extra $60 to get the game. But they're taking away the value by removing the DLC. Okay, what if I want the DLC and I want all the crappy knickknacks? Don't worry, they got you covered, because there's a $220 edition exclusive through Amazon. What the hell, EA? Now, don't get me wrong, I don't like collector's editions in general. I think they're stupid. I don't know what you plan to do with a poster for a game you haven't played yet. What? What are you? What? You're gonna put that on your wall? What if the game sucks? You're just gonna look at your wall and just get mad all the time. You're gonna put that little statuette there. When you realize the game sucks, you're just gonna punch that 14-inch statue. It's gonna shatter into a million pieces because it's made out of cotton candy and cardboard. I have no tolerance for this collecting culture that's bubbling up. These loot crates or whatever. You just spend money on crap that doesn't do anything. So, at least for $130, you'd think you'd get the goddamn game. But no, you don't. You get DLC. $190, you get the game. But no, you don't get the DLC. You have to spend $220 to get the DLC and the game. Or better yet, just don't. Just buy the game. $60 saves you a lot of trouble. But for even offering this stupid package, EA, you are the idiots of the week. And I like EA. So when they do something stupid, I point it out. Okay? Look, today's culture and climate can be quite complicated. And that was a lot of alliteration. But why don't we go back to a simpler time? Why don't we find out what happened 10 years ago and beyond in this week in history in something we like to call Strong History. Real quick, we don't often have stories in Strong History, but it has been occurring more often. Archive.org recently had the first 13 years of Nintendo Power, the magazine, scanned and uploaded onto their servers, which is so cool. So if you want to go read the original Nintendo Powers, you can now. I would just love it if someone were to do that to EGM. This is deeply important to me. Video game magazines really shaped video game culture in the 90s. Not so much in the 80s. Not so much. I mean, I don't know. Well, I think they informed consumer purchases. Like, they would emphasize a certain game to get Nintendo players to buy them. But in the 90s, that's where news came from. This is before the internet, of course. That wouldn't happen until the latter half of the decade. So I really hope we can get more of those magazines. Next Gen Gamer, Insight, Electronic Gamely Monthly. Was it Gamely Monthly? Gaming Monthly. Why'd I get Gamely? Ugh, smells bad. Ugh. Anyway, let's find out what the anniversaries are. 10 years ago, on the PC, Dwarf Fortress was released. This is one of the most complex and longest running games I can think of. I don't think I can do it justice. Merely Google it. It doesn't look like much of a game, but trust me, the systems are beyond complex. Also 10 years ago, the original Dead Rising was released on the Xbox 360, the first truly great Xbox 360 game. Wasn't out on Xbox, just Xbox 360. Hundreds of zombies on the screen at once, and then it was ported over to the Wii as Chop Till You Drop and was garbage. 11 years ago in Japan, DS Jump Superstars. Yes, the original DS had Jump Superstars. This is where they merged a bunch of anime characters together from the Soujin Jump magazine, including, Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, things like that. You actually can see that franchise lives on to this day and even had a PlayStation 4 release last year. Last year, I want to say. Yeah. 14 years ago, on Newgrounds.com, Alien Hominid would be released. Why am I mentioning a Flash game? Well, especially Newgrounds.com. Does Newgrounds.com, are they still big? I know they still exist. I just don't wonder if they're still big. This would go on to create the team known as the Behemoth. They were the top tier of Newgrounds. They're actually people that worked at Newgrounds making games. And Alien Hominid was kind of like their next big game after Pico, which was their other franchise that they had beforehand. It became so popular and so well received because it was such a novelty. A 2D game in 2002? My goodness, this is fun. I feel like I'm living 8 years ago. Well, it became such a big success that they actually printed the damn game on disc for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox, and maybe it was GameCube even. And that would create the success that would lead to things like Castle Crashers and Battle Block Theater. And I would submit that Newgrounds is what created the current independent game. Now, there were always, different companies releasing, mail order shareware games. But this for me is where the modern independent game started 14 years ago. It's pretty damn cool. 15 years ago on the Game Boy Color, WWF Betrayal was released. The only reason I mention this is because WWF Betrayal is not a wrestling game. It's not a racing game. It's a beat 'em up. You're just going into the locker room and beating up people as Stone Cold Steve Austin. It is reportedly one of the worst beat 'em ups of all time. 16 years ago on the Dreamcast in America, August 7th, 2000. Seaman was released. Now, Seaman was this game where you had a microphone in your Dreamcast and you would talk into it. I still have my microphone. I still have my copy of Seaman. I still have my Dreamcast. I haven't plugged it in a while, but it was like a virtual pet that you had to nurture. And after a long process, unless you messed with your internal clock on your Dreamcast, Seaman would appear. It's a fish dude who would ask you things like, what is the most important tool ever invented? How do you feel about relationships? And you just talk to this frog thing. Was it much of a game? Kind of, sort of, yeah, But it was an incredibly bizarre and cool experience. There was a sequel on the PlayStation 2 in Japan only that apparently was not very good. And I don't speak Japanese, so I'd never be able to play it. Also, 16 years ago, Tenchu 2, Birth of the Stealth Assassins was released. A fantastic ninja game where basically you just kind of skulked around little villages and stabbed people in horrific ways. It took the element of the fatality from Mortal Kombat and kind of had it be a basic mechanic in the game. It would reward you for not getting caught, and you'd sneak up on somebody and just slit their throats and their heads would pop off, or stab them right through the chin, or gut them right through the stomach. It's a good game. I really enjoyed Tenchu 2. 17 years ago, on the PC, System Shock 2 was released, which was such an influential game. It would go on to basically found the concept of BioShock. And it was so popular that, of course, we're getting remakes of the System Shock series next year, which will also be on the PlayStation 4. Pretty cool. Also, 17 years ago, Chocobo Racing was released on the PlayStation. That really shows the divide between where consoles were and where PC was. You got Chocobo Racing on the PlayStation, System Shock 2 on the PC. They're both really fun games. One was a little bit more serious, though. 18 years ago, because, hey, we're talking about wrestling, why not? On the Nintendo 64, WWF Warzone was released, which included a create-a-player. Quite a novelty back then, but is really grown into a culture of its own, creating your own characters in wrestling games. Warzone was terrible. It basically had dial-up combos. Like, if you wanted to perform a Stone Cold Stunner, it would be like right down on the C-pad when your special is highlighted. Nowhere near as good as WrestleMania 2000. Also, 18 years ago on the PlayStation, Batman and Robin was released, which was a terrible game. Terrible game based off a terrible movie. 19 years ago on the Nintendo 64, Tetrasphere was released. I would say, overly complex rendition of Tetris where you were building a sphere. But hey, they wanted to show off 3D graphics. That was a way to do it. 19 years ago on the PlayStation, Point Blank was released in Japan. This was a light gun minigame, a precursor to WarioWare, where rather than, just going through a big long stage and shooting zombies or shooting cowboys or shooting whatever, they just gave you these bizarre games. Like, it would just be a dude with an apple on his head and you had to shoot the apple, and if you missed, then you lost a life. Incredibly fun games. And the PlayStation version actually had an adventure game element where you had to show the guys where to walk by shooting the gun. I never got very far on that, but it was fun. And you can't play it anymore because CRTs. That makes me very sad. 20 years ago, John Romero, the co-founder of id Software, left that company to found Ion Storm, which of course would release Daikatana and some other game called Deus Ex. I'm not sure what that is. But this was a big deal. Many people said, oh man, so much for id. I guess it's going away. Far from it. Their next hell, of course, would be Quake. Actually, I think Quake was already out. But they would continue that success. Also, 20 years ago, RoboPit was released on the PlayStation. Neat little game that allowed you to build your own robots and fight in an arena. You pick a torso, a head, arms, what weapons they would have. Didn't control well, but the ability to customize was Awesome. Also, 20 years ago in Japan, Harvest Moon was released on the Super Nintendo. That was in 1996. I always think of Harvest Moon as an earlier release, but no, came out 20 years ago this week. That's a franchise that is still going strong, no matter what they call it, Story of Seasons or whatever. And then you've got these Stardew Valley, which is deeply influenced by it. Just a very alternative game, very peaceful game. And I would encourage you to play a Harvest Moon before the summer is through. This is the best season to play a Harvest Moon game. 21 years ago in America, Chrono Trigger was released, which to many people is the greatest JRPG of all time. That is not me saying it. I don't agree with that. I believe it is one of the greatest, but just it was a very ambitious merger of talent from Square Enix and from Squaresoft and Enix joining forces to make this weird little game, and the result was utterly fantastic. A very unique battle system. Just go listen to the music. It's so good. Also, 21 years ago, the Ninja Gaiden trilogy was released in America on the Super Nintendo. This was quite the novelty back then, where you were re-releasing old games on the current platform. Of course, there were things like Super Mario All-Stars, but this is different. The games don't really look that much better, but it was quite the bargain. It is no longer because this game is rare. 21 years ago as well, BS Zelda No Detsu was in Japan. BS stand for Broadcast Satellite. This was a joint partnership between Saint Seiya, I want to say was the name of the company, and Nintendo. What they would do is you would have to be part of the Saint Seiya program. You get a special cartridge that you would plug in, and kind of like Sega Channel, you'd have to screw something into the system or cartridge even, and you would have to play the game at 7 o'clock that night. And they would have actors doing voiceovers to the game. Incredibly novel. We never had that in America. People are trying to basically recreate that experience right now by collecting sound files. It's getting there, you know, it's just very different. Very, very different. And we never had something else quite like that. 22 years ago on the Game Boy, Wario Blast featuring Bomberman was released in Japan. This is an often forgotten Game Boy game, which saw Wario fighting against Bomberman. This is when, you know, both characters were relatively new. Wario was fresh on the block, and they weren't sure where they were going to put him. He would end up on the Virtual Boy and obviously on the Game Boy, and they didn't know if he would ever go to consoles, which he would later on, of course. Just a neat little thing. 23 years ago on the Neo Geo, the home console, Samurai Showdown. Is it as good as Samurai Showdown 2? Certainly not, but my god. Samurai Showdown was a breath of fresh air in the 2D fighting landscape, while many others were attempting to replicate the success of Street Fighter. Samurai Showdown took it a little bit more slower paced, and asked you to really think about your attacks, because one slash of a sword could take half of your health bar off. 26 years ago, on the Game Boy in Japan, Amazing Penguin was released. What else can you say about Amazing Penguin? It was Penguin. 28 years ago, The Adventures of Bayou Billy was released in Japan on the Famicom. This was a Konami game that would come out in America sometime later and be cripplingly difficult, whereas the Japanese version is relatively easy. Maybe download a ROM of it and check it out for yourself. After, of course, purchasing it legally on the Wii U eShop or Wii eShop. And lastly, 35 years ago, version 1.0 of DOS was released. Now, there's just nothing I can say that will be able to stress to you how important DOS was. I can give you a glimpse, I can't give you the full picture. DOS is what Windows is built off of, and there were revisions and revisions and revisions all the way until the very end of the 90s, and even now, many things have just DOS elements. DOS created PC games, everything. DOS. I can't do it justice. So you know what? That's going to have to do it for Strong History. Only 35 years ago. Really makes you wonder, you know, what people will think of, Linux when they look back in the future. But anyway, we've had some fun. We've had some serious talk. We had some number talk. I think it's time to close out the show. Remember, you can contact the PRESSURECAST, pressurecast@gmail.com. You can text 954-947-7377 or leave a voicemail or even tweet at PRESSURECASTPod using the hashtag PRESSURECAST. What's going to be coming up this week? No Man's Sky is going to be out. I'm going to do a first hour on it, and then I'm going to try and work on a review of it or an impression of it before next Tuesday. So that's my current schedule right now. Beyond that, nothing really, but we are edging closer to the really good part of the fall where game after game comes out and I can get back into a more steady review cycle, which I'm looking forward to. No Man's Sky sounds awesome. I'm looking forward to it. They say that there are 5 trillion planets to explore, whatever it is, which means you'll never be able to do it. No one will. We'll be dead before we ever explore those planets, which means the PRESSURECAST is going to have to do it. Because the PRESSURECAST is forever. See you guys. PRESSURECAST, weekly video game news podcast, is solely owned and operated by Colin Tanner. Guests of the PRESSURECAST are not employees or freelancers of Colin Tanner, the PRESSURECAST, or VideoGamesAreDumb.com, and are not paid. Music featured on the PRESSURECAST is property of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended. For more information, email pressurecast@gmail.com.